Good evening. I am honored to be here today, and even more honored that the ELCA invited me here as an openly gay man and as an anti-bullying activist. Let me tell you a little bit about what happened to me. For me, the harassment and bullying started when I was in the 7th grade. Other kids in my class had figured out that I was gay and they started to call me names. And when I reported those things, I was initially told that they would take care of it, they being my principals and my teachers. And eventually, the name calling didn't stop and it turned to violence. I reported what was happening after I got punched and kicked in the bathroom in my 7th grade year to my principal, who told me, Jamie, if you're going to be openly gay, this kind of stuff is going to happen to you. My principal told me that. The violence continued to escalate until the point that I actually got beaten up so badly in my 11th grade year that I had to be rushed to the hospital and I had to have surgery to correct internal bruising and bleeding. My spleen had ruptured and my stomach was torn. I knew that if I went back to school that they would kill me. I ran away from home and eventually my parents allowed me to move down to Minneapolis where I knew I would be safe. Okay. Once I got to Minneapolis, though, I found out way too quickly that I wasn't the only one that had went through what I went through. That there were kids from every school all over the area who had been bullied. Some of them because of their sexual orientation, some of them because they weren't thin enough, or because they weren't smart enough, or because they weren't athletic enough. For whatever reason, kids were being bullied all over and no one was doing anything about it. I found a lawyer in Minneapolis who said, let's take your school to court and hold them accountable. We did that, and in 1996, I won the very first case against my school for failing to protect me. So that brings me here, speaking in front of all of you, which I never in a million years would have thought I'd be doing when I was going through everything that I was going through in school. But I'm here with a message. And that message is that I have been traveling around the country the last 2 years. There was a documentary called Bullied, made about my life by the Southern Poverty Law Center. That documentary has been sent out to over 100,000 schools nationwide. It's available free if any of you are interested in getting it for your youth groups or your schools from tolerance.org. But the documentary tells my story. And I left a corporate job to continue to do the work that I feel is most important, which is stopping bullying. But one of the things I realized once I started going out was that bullying isn't going to be stopped because we get a new policy, or we have another state law, or we have, principals and teachers who want to take this on. Bullying is going to stop when all of you decide that you're going to stand up every single day and say enough is enough. There are 2 different types of bullying I want to talk to you about and give you some practical things that you can do to stop them. The first one is the unintentional bullying that's happening all too often around this country. I hear kids say so often, and I'll ask you, how many of you have heard somebody call somebody or heard the word retard in the last week? Raise your hands. How many of you have heard somebody say that's so gay or call something gay in the last week? These things are not said to offend people or hurt people, but they do. The reality is that those things are very hurtful and very painful to many people who are gay and lesbian or who have friends and relatives who are. I have a cousin who's actually a special education teacher. And she actually talked to me about the fact that when she was in college and even as a first couple year teacher, she would get so offended when people would use the word retard. And she'd lecture them and point fingers at them and tell them to knock it off. Do you think that was very effective? No. She said, one day I just looked at somebody and I said, you know what? Those words hurt and offend the people I work with every day, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't use them. That was it. And she said the response was amazing. And I'm here to tell all of you, you can say the same thing, whether it's that's so gay or whether it's the word retard. When people say the word gay or call something that's so gay, I say, you know what, as a gay man, I'm hurt by that, and I'd appreciate it if you don't use it. When somebody doesn't mean to offend or hurt somebody and you tell them they have, 99% of people will say, I'm sorry, and they'll stop and they'll think before they do it again. But that brings us to the next type of bullying, which is the intentional bullying. The things that are done to hurt and humiliate people for the sole purpose of hurting and humiliating. And there are 3 things that I want to talk to you about that you can do. Most of the apologies that I've received from the people that went to my school were not from my bullies, but they were from the bystanders, the kids who stood by and watched what happened to me and did nothing. And there are 3 ways that you can deal with this. The first way, and the most powerful way, is to stand up in the moment. When somebody is hurting somebody, calling somebody names, ostracizing somebody, whatever it is, tell them to knock it off. Stand up and say, that's it. You will be surprised by how many other people in the room will back you up and support you, because you know what? Most people don't want their school to be a place where people go and don't feel welcome. They want their school to be a place where everyone feels welcome. But you have to be the one that has the courage. You have to be the one that has the courage to stand up. Be that person. And as I sit here, I know that not everybody in the room is that person. I know that there are those in the room who are afraid for themselves. If I stand up, they'll bully me. If I stand up, they'll hurt me. You're not off the hook either. I need you to stand up and go tell somebody what's going on. Talk to a teacher, talk to a guidance counselor, a principal, your youth pastor, your parents. Let somebody know that somebody's being hurt and you want something done about it. So often kids do not tell anybody about the harassment that's happening to them, and they suffer in silence. And when adults and other people know, they will do something about it, but they can't if they don't know. And so you can be the person that does that. And the final thing is probably the simplest thing, but I will guarantee you that it will mean more to them than anything. And that is to reach out to them. Let them know that they're not alone. Let them know that you're there for them. Invite them to sit with you at lunch. Invite them to come to your church. Invite them to join the groups that you're in. Don't let them feel so isolated and alone. I think a lot about all of the kids that we've lost over the last couple of years to suicide because of bullying. And I wonder what would have happened if one student in one of those schools had stood up and said, knock it off. What would have happened if one student in one of those schools had told somebody what was going on? What would have happened if one student in one of those schools had said, hey, come and have lunch with me. Hey, come and join choir with me. Do something. That student might still be here today. And so my message to all of you is this. We can no longer allow this to continue and go on. We must start standing up. We must tell people what's going on. And as Christians, we are obligated to reach out to those that are suffering and make sure that the suffering ends. I know that your bishop last night said that we cannot wait for things to get better. They have to get better now. And you have the power to do that. You have the power to make it better now in your churches, in your schools, on your buses, and in your communities. Jesus was a peacemaker. He spent his life making peace and teaching others to do that. And he calls on all of us to be the same things in our daily lives. Imagine what the world would be like if each of us stood up whenever we saw injustice, whether it be by a person, a corporation, a church, or a government. Imagine the type of world we would live in if everyone said enough is enough and there was peace and justice in the world. That's the world that I want to live in, and that's the world that I know you can create by standing up and saying enough is enough. Thank you.